Hi, my name is Matthew McQuilla. I am back again with Professor Backer to discuss his book, Hong Kong Between One Country and Two Systems. Today, we will be discussing Chapter 6, Thoughts on Albert Chen Hung-yee's The Dilemma of Rational Communication, written on August 6, 2019. How are you doing, Professor Backer?
Very well, very well. Excited that to be here and really pleased that you've got the stamina to work through these chapters one by one. So my hat's off to you.
Well, thank you. It's funny though, because I was looking forward to this chapter. This was probably one of my favorite chapters in the whole book. And not just because it was only 7 pages, although that probably played a big role in it. But this chapter had a lot to do with, I guess you'd say, things that I'm interested in. But it told a story. And in my opinion, it started to create a narrative that would be relevant to the rest of the book. So first, I'd like to start off with the beginning of this chapter. You talk about the positioning of those observers, uh, almost and comparatively to a Greek tragedy. And in my opinion, what I visualized was you hear stories about the Civil War and people sitting up on hills where they believe they were, safe from danger and were observant to the atrocities that were going on down on the field. How would you characterize the position of those observers in this
Well,
context?
that's actually a very astute point. And it is one perspective. There's multiple perspectives here. Yours is actually quite an astute one that in this case, the reference to the Greek tragedy was actually and for me in this chapter was the chorus as the chorus watches, right, which is what you're looking at. The chorus, of course, in Greek tragedies are also off to the side, up on a hilltop, watching the armies do what armies do, thinking that they're safe, thinking that they're channeling something that will protect them, but ultimately discovering to their horror, perhaps, that they are as embroiled in what is about to take place as the combatants. But the reason it struck me in this case was not so much of the tragedy in the sense of modern TV tragedies, but in its old Greek sense, in the sense that you've got major powerful figures or forces who are what they are, who must be who they are, who then encounter themselves and who through a series of interactions must, by being who they are, reach a point where one or more of them will face disaster. And that's in a sense what's going on here. And for me, and in the process, of course, you've got the chorus on the sideline, people who can see this, who become increasingly horrified, who try to counsel, please think about this. Please, you're about to anger the gods. Please think about this other thing. There must be a way, and all of this, and at the same time knowing that what they're saying may be more to for them or for others around them than for the principal combatants, who, even if they can hear and even if they're completely aware of what they are doing and where their choices will inevitably take them, cannot but do what they're doing. Right. And so that's sort of what struck me here. This the setup, the traditional setup for Greek tragedy, and then looking at who the chorus may be. And in this case, it would be those groups of people, especially extraordinarily highly distinguished, globally recognized figures who serve as the kind of voice of reason, who seek in detachment some sort of Olympian view of the situation, and who at the end of the day are desperate for a resolution that preserves the best of the situation as they see it. And that's, in a sense, what this chapter is about. And my engagement with, and this is not the last, but the first of my engagements with a number of essays that Professor Chen wrote during the, and for me, the most profoundly affecting ones, the ones that were written during the first half of what winds up being the protest movement.
So would you say that those who are stakeholders in this, or people who live around Hong Kong that may not necessarily be a part of either camp, are more likely to seek to be that counsel because they aren't just on some hill that is away from the story, but they also in their lives and livelihoods are under threat from the situation at hand? Do you think that that adds to a sense of urgency for these people?
Ooh, a naughty question, but yeah, one that's worth answering, and somewhat provocatively, in this case, um, there's two ways of looking at this. One, the simple way is to take your very subtle question and to be more brutally blunt and say, yes, I agree with you. At some point, what the chorus has to understand is that they've got to take sides. And they can take sides with whomever once they identify the major actors. And in this case, the major actors are their webs, extraordinarily empowering webs of global connections within the academic community and the policy community, or their intimate connections with the popular manifestations of popular sentiment within Hong Kong, or an intellectual and political allegiance to the fundamental objectives and realities that are represented by the central government and their and the ideology, the political social ideology on which the state is founded. Those are the three choices. There are probably a bunch of other sub-choices, but at some point, as a chorus, you're going to align, and you're going to have to align. And part of it may well depend on where you are when the alignment occurs and how you ultimately place yourself within this. I found this essay to be particularly interesting precisely because of its efforts to not avoid it, but to see if there's a way of reconciling. And it's that effort at reconciliation, which is also one of the fundamental elements of the choral obligation or the choral duty in a Greek tragedy, the effort to reconcile, and to reconcile it both in terms of the modality of communication, and here the difference between violence and discourse, between an unwillingness to engage and an openness to engage. You know, those are the things that make the essays both poignant and at the same time very interesting.
Was there any evidence that this essay did not fall on deaf ears?
It's hard to say. My object in writing it was not to look at its impact. You know, I'll leave that for social scientists who will measure this in any way that they find useful. My object was to look at what traditionally had been an influential academic voice, an influential not just within Hong Kong or not just within China, but globally, to see what that might tell us about the positioning of, in this case, elite academic elements who are within Hong Kong, but also deeply embedded in webs of relationships within China and then globally, where how that multiple embeddedness will lead them to both visualize or express their sense of things, and ultimately where and how they will have to inevitably embed themselves within.
Yeah, I think that that is something that we'll probably have to delve into later in this book. How embedded the academic community as a whole, and especially in Hong Kong, was in into this arena. So I think that that just about does it on this article. Is there anything else that you would like to add or explain to the readers? I know it's short chapter, so I didn't want to give all the cookies away
Yeah,
to everybody. But is there something that you would like to add?
yeah. Here, I think for the first time, and it's an interesting place where you can actually see for the first time. And the reason I like this was because I was able to to watch this emerge, not exogenously, that is, from the capitals in Brussels or Washington or anywhere else, but within Hong Kong itself, what might ultimately be viewed as the local version of the internationalist counter discourse to the discourse that was being developed already over the course of the last 8 weeks um, by the central authorities. And I think you could not have found a more profound uh, writer of something like this than the author of the essay that I then grapple with in this chapter. We'll see more of this, of course, but here it's not merely a simple essay about can we all get along or can we reason together. It's actually a more profound effort to attempt to reconcile the discursive practices of the globalized West with the profoundly physically passionate discourse on the streets and its excesses with the profoundly Leninist perspectives that were the basis of the responses by the central authority. Whether this will work or not, you're going to have to stay tuned. But it's there, and it really is a very nice initial manifestation of something that then gets refined, not in Hong Kong, but more and more and more over the course of 2019 and 2020 in Washington primarily, and then to some extent in Geneva.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of complicated interweaving between different discourses. So, well, if there's nothing else you would like to add, um, I would like to say thank you again for having this conversation with me, for your future readers. Um, and to any reader or any listener out there, feel more than free to shoot us an email and ask us any questions that you would like explained. Don't ask us to read the book to you because you have to buy it. Any promotion today?
Yes, so please buy this book.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you, Professor Backer, for being on again, and you have a nice day.
All right, you too, and thank you. And for those of you who are listening, thank you again for tuning in to yet another chapter, and I look forward to further discussions.
All right.